Hello! I recently picked up an IBM PS2 Model 3286 from e-waste, and it was in a very rough shape, but it's always worth restoring such old systems regardless of their condition. The front bezel in particular was pretty rough. Not only were both floppy and hard drive bay covers missing, and by the way, if you know of some good reproductions that I could 3D print, please leave a comment below, but it was full of deep scratches, scuffs, and some of its bits had broken off. This thin plastic bit in the middle that provides some structural support to the top of the bezel was bent in the middle and had broken off completely. I straightened it as much as I could and glued it back on with some super glue, but it's still not 100% straight. Most of these plastic bits that hold the bezel to the chassis had broken off too. All three tabs at the top were missing, along with the part of the bezel that slides under the case cover. But most annoyingly, on the top right hand side of the bezel, an identification number was etched onto the plastic by its previous owner. It was deeply etched into the plastic with some engraving tool, so the only way to remove it that I could think of was to sand it down. Given the rough overall shape of the bezel, this was an opportunity for experimentation. I sanded down the engraved numbers with a 400 grit sandpaper, but as expected, this resulted in a shiny, smooth looking surface. This is a problem because just like most vintage computers, the plastic bezel of the Model 30 has a texture, and the texture affects the way the light gets reflected from the surface, which makes the sanded down section look like it's a different color. The sanded section is smooth, and as a result it looks brighter and more white than the textured part, especially when you look at an angle. It looks like it has been painted with a slightly different shade of beige. To fix this, we need to recreate the texture. I'm going to use this engraving pen with a small 2.3mm drill bit. I set the speed to the lowest setting and hit the plastic with the tool repeatedly, applying very little force. As you can see, we are already forming some texture. I had to stop and continue doing this outside because of the dust. 10 minutes later, it looks like this. The texture is very rough, so it needs some sanding. This time I used a finer 1500 grit sandpaper and sanded it very lightly. As you can see, it looks much better now. I kept working on the surface for another 10 minutes, and in the meantime I also tried a different bit that creates more round shapes in the texture pattern. After some very light sanding and a few more rounds of adding texture and sanding, this is the final result. The new texture pattern is obviously different if you zoom into it, but from a distance they look pretty similar. Well, at least it doesn't look like it's a different color anymore, which is nice. I think when you look at the bezel now, it is these other imperfections in the middle that stand out. Overall, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Given that it took me about half an hour to form some half decent texture, I think this texture forming technique is actually worth it. Of course, it doesn't scale to large surfaces. It would take an awful lot of time to do this on a drive bezel, for example. If you have some ideas on how else we could create texture on plastic parts of all computers, especially for larger surfaces, feel free to share them in the comments below. Anyway, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching and goodbye.